Alrighty, hi everyone. My name is Sasson Stahl. This is Sinan Bruce, and this is Jordan Schmidt. And our capstone presentation for the fall of 2024 in the Political Analytics program is Election Trends in the Digital Age, Social Media as Signal. So, to get us started, we have our table of contents, and this is just our little roadmap of what journey we're going to take you guys on. Where we're going to go over key concepts, methods and data analysis, use cases, and then our roadmap. Now, to get started though with our introduction, we're going to give some context into the 2024 U.S. election. So with the 2024 U.S. election on July 2024, you saw that Joseph R. Biden, our current president, stepped down from the race and quickly endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, this is monumental because this marks the first time that a woman of color is at the top of a presidential major party ticket in U.S. history, but this also marks the third Democrat to go against Republican Donald Trump. So previously we had Hillary Clinton and Biden go against Trump. So, what we see going on here is immediately after Harris took the reins of the Democratic Party ticket, she was leading Donald Trump in the polls in key swing states. There were 7 this election, mainly in the Sun Belt and in the Blue Wall. And coincidentally, though, she was polling lower compared to her previous nominees or her predecessors. And we're trying to understand why. To give further context, there is little to no literature on the electability of women in the U.S. executive office. The sample size for that is 1, and that was Hillary Clinton. However, I do want to make the distinction between legislative and executive, because for Kamala Harris, it is monumental for her to already be in executive office because to date, there has never been a Black woman serving as a state government either. So it is a very rare occurrence to see women of color in this branch of government. Additionally, we were trying to understand and question what barriers were working against Harris in her presidential bid against Donald Trump. There is a 2023 study that came out when Harris was just serving as VP, where they analyzed racial resentment, hostile sexism towards the past 4 Democratic presidential nominees, which was kind of like a good breakdown in terms of the lens of intersectionality, because you had a white man, Biden, a white woman, Hillary Clinton, and then a Black man, Obama, and a Black woman, Kamala Harris, to be analyzed. And they saw that racial resentment, hostile sexism were especially prevalent towards Harris, even when she was just a VP. So, on top of that, we are also having the big question too of whether or not Harris can win back Biden's coalition in 2020, which is predominantly young white men. And this was a concern when we were looking at the polling numbers between the past few presidential nominees for the Democrats. And also there is the potential for pragmatic bias as well, which pragmatic bias, if you don't know, the term is kind of it's always been this way, so why change it now? And that perception exists there's never been a woman as president, so why should that change now?
True.
In addition, we were also comparatively thinking about, trying to understand the polling, but how can we use alternative measures comparable to the polling data to understand more about voter attitudes of Kamala Harris in this election? So we thought about social media. Our first thought was X, or formerly known as Twitter. And let's just say, in 2022, X went under new leadership, and subjectively speaking, and this became really difficult for data collection to be acquired for user data, especially voter data. And also, according to Newswire, since the said leader or owner of X has taken over. X has been the hotbed of political disinformation. So we want to actually get an accurate and non-biased estimate of voter attitudes between the candidates. And so we looked at options with Reddit, the appeal of Reddit Kid, and just the sense of morality amongst specific subreddits in order to have like some sort of stability in your debate topics. But there was also appeal too with the user base. The user base for Reddit, and I'm directly quoting this because I don't want to mess up, because it's a specific order: male, young, liberal, wealthy, educated, white, and Asian. So a lot of these demographics are part of the coalition strategy for the Harris campaign that needed to have a targeting strategy necessary to win the election. And finally, to add some final context, there is existing literature on how social media opinions can be gauged with machine learning and how they can be forecasted for presidential elections. So a lot to take in.
So polling is considered, as Mark previously mentioned, as Saxon mentioned, polling is considered the gold standard when assessing public opinion. But recently the field has been called into question, partly because in 2016 and 2020, polls overstated Democratic support, and partly because there's a lack of understanding when it comes to the general public and what polling is and what it actually means. The industry is always looking to improve, and our goal is to evaluate complementary methods that could be used to explain or confirm what we're seeing in the polls. In this particular election, there were 5 key voting blocks that were influential in explaining what happened. Harris underperformed in each of these voting blocks compared to Biden in 2020. In addition, the Harris campaign spent a significant amount of time and resources targeting women, specifically white women, with the hopes that abortion and women's rights would be a mobilizing policy and encourage them to turn out to vote.
So to give like a sort of overarching idea of like what we're exactly studying, so our research question is, how can we organically evaluate key demographics perceptions of Kamala Harris? Like whether she's a strong candidate on like certain issues, whether she's a weak candidate on other issues. What is she like able to bring to the table on that regards, and what is she not able to bring to the table? And we hope to corroborate essentially polling data through social media. Is this like a possible link that we can choose, and like what tools and technologies would we have to rely on to go about this? So we hope to use this this like question we had about Kamala Harris as first of all a candidate for president, and then also like 2 of her policy platforms, specifically abortion and economy, as a proxy for trying to answer this research question.
Next, we're going to go into our key concepts, and this is just an extension of how we connected our research question to existing models and theories and processes that we've looked into. So do you want to go first with this?
Yeah, so I could talk about like assumptions of social media, because this is a pretty interesting way we're kind of going about this question, and there's a lot of we have to like sort of set the rules of the playing field a little bit. So first of all, we are assuming that the people that we are like web scraping, if you will, on Reddit, that they are real people, that they are independent of each other, so there's no 2 accounts which are like tied to each other. That's called sock puppetry. So 1 account per person, and that they're like not robots. We are also assuming that they are likely voters, that they are registered voters, that they live in the United States, and they're going to choose to vote for either Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris. We are also assuming that how they communicate online reflects who they are as a person in real life, which, as we know, can be pretty different. How people express themselves based off of like, ideas of digital footprint versus like what you say in real life, that can be a pretty big gap. We are also assuming that these threads are representatives of some concerns that the voters have. They might not be expressing most of their concerns, but they are expressing some things and that they are truthful again.
And going to the topic of social media, there is the thought process of potentially social desirability bias that can appear in the polling. So, you had the potential of getting a user's real opinions or their thoughts with the protection of being anonymous. So that's something to think about. But with polling and social media, there were three types of comparisons or three types of methodologies that we were thinking about when doing this. And shout out to Cliff Young if he's listening in the Great Beyond.
Actually, on Soundwave, definitely in the Great Beyond.
So, you had enhancement, which was when non-survey inputs complement the polling data. And then you also have substitution, which is the outright replacement of non-surveyed inputs instead of polling data. And then you have extensions, which is just building off of non-surveyed inputs with stuff that the polling can't solve. And so those were the type of comparisons that we saw. But then also the conceptual theories that we found with the multi-attribute model, which was a very prevalent model for us in our methodology, was essentially the ratings and rankings of the election. You're thinking about how voters are prioritizing certain issues, especially in the ranking section, what they saw as the big issue. But also, how do they attribute specific policy points to an object or, in this case, candidate. So this actually ties in well to the main problem heuristic. The main problem heuristic is essentially this statement and really good estimation point of where 85% of the time the candidate that's perceived to be the strongest candidate on the main problem in an election will win their election 85% of the time. So real quick, what do we think was the main problem in the 2024 election? And you can shout it out. The economy, God. Yeah. So who was perceived the strongest on the economy? It was interesting because certain polling or certain polls saw that Trump was strongest on the economy, but Harris was seen as strongest on inflation and inflation reduction, which it kind of told us that it depends on how you ask the question. And going back to the X factor real quick, we're also thinking about how much time this perception of strength is communicated to the voting electorate. Harris became the nominee 107 days before Election Day. She only had that amount of time to actually plead her case to the American people about her economic agenda. But on that note, though, in the candidate versus voter conceptual theory, we also have the solid bull model, which is incumbency plus approval rating equals probability of victory. And what that was kind of difficult for us because we were trying to understand who was the incumbent here. You had Kamala Harris, who's a part of the current administration, as vice president. But you had Donald Trump, who was already president. So was this going to be seen as Kamala Harris as the incumbent or Trump as the existing incumbent, because it became a question also of, is this going to be a changing election or a continuing election as well?
Okay, so we have on the left-hand side, we have our variables that we're trying to measure. So we're looking to evaluate opinions on Harris's electability, economy or economic plan, and abortion stance. It's important to clarify that our data that we're about to show you is not necessarily reflective of the amount of people in a certain subgroup that felt positively about either of these things, but more a statement of the likelihood that this group will feel positively in regarding these outcomes. And then as for validity, we're just looking to verify against publicly available polling data, that the data that we've collected aligns with what we expect to see. And then as for reliability, we're looking for consistency of data collection. So if we were to put the same users through OpenAI again, would we get the same results, or how much would they vary? And hopefully we're looking to have a valid and reliable study. Fingers crossed.
So we're gonna sort of walk through like what we actually did and our sort of our data collection and our methodology. So we first scraped a bunch of threads on data. So we scraped 7 threads. All of these threads were in political subreddits. They all had something to sort of do with economy. Some of these threads were people talking about recently released polls at the time.
The thread is.
Sorry?
You might want to explain what the thread is.
The thread?
Okay.
Like, I guess whoever is more, based off the main problem heuristic, whoever is more strong on the economy.
No, a thread, like channel on the Reddit.
Oh, thread, sorry. I was understood. So on Reddit, you can post, make posts on Reddit. Reddit is essentially like a social media where it's basically a giant forum site. So you can post a thread, you post a post, and then commenters can comment on this post. They could give their insights or cuss them out or compliment them. And people can respond to these comments, and then you sort of get like a dialogue that you can sort of scrape to get like some insights on, especially like in an election context, people's thoughts on the election. So 535 users participated in these threads, across these threads. And as I was saying, these threads mainly had to do with the economy. There are a couple of threads which had to do with abortion. And we made sure to get as representative of the sample as we could have, as was possible. So some threads, for example, had to do with Black women or Black girls, or it was r/Black women, r/Black girls. And then there was like moderate politics, r/Republican, r/conservative, and like r/neoliberal. So the user comment, and then from there were like in total across these 7 threads, 1,454 comments written by these 535 users, which is our N. So the user comment history was from here. Because we need to like interpret, what's being going on. We need to wrangle. It's input into OpenAI's API. It's used in ChatGPT, and we asked it to we prompted it to conduct a stylometric analysis to determine like the user demographics of this data, so we could do some quantitative analysis. As part of this, we also asked it to conduct a sentiment analysis to determine the likelihood of, feeling positive about the 3 variables that we're interested in: Harris's electability, Harris's economic agenda, Harris's abortion agenda. So now we can start talking about OpenAI's API and like some more. This is essentially we're going to have some more assumptions that we're going to lay out here. What's very important to emphasize is that there's a degree of accuracy, and it's unknown what our accuracy is. Essentially, there is this analysis does result in substantive conclusions. However, since we cannot determine true positives, since we cannot interview each user that we scrape their data from, if we had the resources, we could. Since we cannot determine that, we cannot say there's a true positive and what are false positives, and therefore we can't give a number of accuracy. We are also assuming that the OpenAI's API algorithm is not biased and reasonably up to date. This is an interesting assumption, which I think we'll talk about later, actually, but just some foreshadowing. And also some OpenAI's API can handle qualitative data analysis and understanding, and so that it has the capacity to understand and perceive nuanced speech, which it actually did pretty well. And I was actually impressed the degree it was able to actually have stylometric analysis. Stylometry, by the way, is the ability to parse text and take conclusions of the type of person writing a text. If you could tell their gender, their race, their income, their education. So we're sort of offloading that task to a large language model. This innovative, I'd say that what we're doing is pretty innovative. We're using a lot of recent technologies and tools to understand public opinion, and I think their first study is a proof of concept. So to summarize like what we're doing here, Kamala Harris says something. That information goes towards like likely voters. Presumably, some of these likely voters post their thoughts on Reddit, on social media. We then web scrape it using a program on R. We run this data through to ChatGPT through prompts, and then we ask it to encode these prompts. And then it delivers an output to us, the researcher. And then later on, we'll talk about like validity and reliability tests, and this is kind of like a little dialogue that we have with the LLM. And then this results in conclusions, which we are presenting to you on Google Slides.
Okay, so this is a breakdown of the sample that was determined by ChatGPT's stylometric analysis. We weighted the sample on gender, race, and region based on 2020 turnout. You can see that the sample is extremely liberal, and there are some demographics or groups in age group and location that are underrepresented. This could be resolved by further weighting, but another way to resolve this that I think is potentially would be a better option for future iterations of this research would be to do a baseline survey, ask people their demographics, collect their Reddit usernames or social media usernames at the beginning of the election cycle. And then throughout the election cycle, you can scrape this data, and maybe if you wanted to be fun at the end, you could do an exit poll, and you could then, make a statement about accuracy, changing opinion over time, and analyze these groups further, and know that what you're analyzing and seeing is accurate.
And that's assuming that the person taking the survey is telling the truth about themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, and so to have another way to look at the sample, so this is our actual breakdown of the 535 users that we saw, and we divided it up by region for regions because it was a little bit more difficult to break it down just by individual state. So regions are more helpful in this context because, as you can remember back to my point about the swing states in this election, you see that Pennsylvania here is located in the northeast region of the United States, and then in the south you have Georgia, North Carolina, but then you also have Michigan, Wisconsin up in the Midwest, and then in the west you have Nevada and Arizona. One of the things that I do want to preface though, with the results that are about to come out, there was a lot of representation of the South in our results. So it's important for us to weigh the data further and sort of have that equitable breakdown and acknowledge also that the states that were very critical in this election or were seen to be critical during polling did not have significant enough representation compared to some of the other regions of the U.S. And so going with that, we're also looking at the typical ideology density of the regions, and going back to what Jordan said, this is a very liberal sample. So this is on a scale of 5 points, 5 being liberal, 0 being conservative. And so as you can see, the West and the Northeast were measured to be the most liberal regions between the four, and then you can see also that the South was closer to conservatism or mercy, because we did have it on a 5-point scale, so 3 would have been assumed to be moderate. Yeah.
Just a quick information, I'll ruin your flow, but the region, is that imputed by GPT or you know the region how to use it?
So what I did was I used US Maps through RStudio, and then what I did was I computed out and separated them by, there was a specific package with US Maps that allowed you to separate them into the regions that you see right now. So they kind of defined it for us already.
Yes, our sample demographics were inferred by ChatGPT.
Okay, so you don't know that this person was actually...
We don't know. We are assuming from the model that, the output of the LLM.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to Sanan's previous point about how we know that there is a true correct answer, and we don't necessarily have a way of determining that.
Okay, 2 seconds.
So we just have to assume for this purpose that it's correct, but in the future, there are hopefully ways that we can get more accurate.
State a project for one of y'all. And going into sentiment analysis now in three main issues that we looked at, which was the economy, the salient issue of abortion, and Harris's electability. So going on to the next slide, we saw and expected that across the board, I set the midpoint of this now at 40%, and otherwise, if it was at 50%, it would have been red for all three results. So that's kind of like a detail of like what's in store for this. And this is the average in each region. So this was averaged out, and as you can see, the South was measured as least favorable for Kamala Harris's economic policy. And then you see in the West and in the Northeast, there is a little bit more favorability, but there may be a representation of major base Republican and base Democratic states. So California may have kind of diluted this actual estimate. And the same thing would be applicable to states like Texas or Florida in this aspect. And then we looked at the abortion sentiment, and this was Harris's strongest asset as a candidate because it was the salient issue of the election, similar to how COVID was for the 2020 election, and Biden was seen as the strongest candidate on that issue. And as you can see, once again, in the West, there is a lot of more favorability towards Harris and her stance on abortion than there is in the South. And so as you're kind of seeing this data, it's kind of making sense that regionally there is consistency across the four regions at this point. And going to Harris's electability as a woman of color in the next slide. And Harris's electability is kind of crazy because, as you can see, across the board, it was a little rough. And Harris was seen as more, perceived as more electable in the West, likely because of California. We're not sure on that estimate. That is an observed outcome in this estimate because it couldn't break it further down into just individual states. However, you can see in the South that there is a lot more research to be called on electability of women of color in executive office because historically only one woman of color has been elected as governor in the South, and that was Nikki Haley as governor of South Carolina. And so it is an interesting history. The only time that a woman of color has been elected governor were both in New Mexico. And so there's a lot of data to really hone in on the differentiation between legislative office and executive office in the South. And yeah, it's just tough seeing like for Harris across the board that and then moving on to our analysis. So Jorgen's going to take us away with that and then go into validity.
Okay, so what you're looking at here is the key demographics in the election. I've just kind of broken them down. I presented it side by side with our data that we collected from Reddit and then AP Votecast, which is a survey of 120,000 registered voters conducted nationally from October 28th through November 5th. Our data was scraped on October 28th, so we have opinions or posts ranging from July 21st, which is when Biden stepped down, through October 28th. Just looking right off the bat, you can see that the sentiment, the likelihood of positive sentiment is really low, and I would suggest that this could be because people are more inclined to express negative opinions than positive opinions. If you go to a restaurant and have bad food, you're more likely to post a Yelp review reflecting that versus if you have a great time posting a positive review. Another explanation could be that while people, for the discrepancy between our data and the polling data, could be that while people feel negatively about Kamala Harris, when asked if they prefer Trump or Harris, they still prefer Harris. So those are potential reasons why our data is so low, our numbers are so low. Economy overall has the lowest likelihood of positive sentiment across all voting blocks. Trump, this kind of makes sense because Trump had an advantage of 4 points over Harris when it came to the economy. And then in 2020, Biden and Trump were both tied 49-49 on perception of who is better equipped to handle the economy. I've done some differentials here to kind of show congruity, whatever. Sorry. So we can see like easily where our data aligns with polling data and where it doesn't. And I would like to make an argument that even where the data doesn't align, it's still interesting and useful. So for example, if you look at 18 to 29-year-olds, voters under 30, pre-race polling appeared to be slightly off the mark in a Ipsos poll that was conducted for ABC News on October 28th through 22nd, or October 18th through 22nd. It predicted that Harris would have a 14-point lead over Trump with this demographic, but actual results showed that it was only a 6-point lead. And you can see that across the board, this is our lowest probability of support. So polling was right, accurately predicted the direction that this group was going to vote in, but I would argue that this data can be used to say, this is a group of interest, maybe we should look into this a little bit further and see what's going on. And then same with the black voters. The Democrats lost key ground. They lost from 2020 to 2024. They lost about 8 or 9 points here, and you can see that sentiment among this group was low.
So let's talk more about reliability. So near the end of this, we were trying to figure out test the limits of chat's stylometric capabilities. And so one of the first things I did was I took a dialogue from the New York Times op-ed section between Gail Collins and Brett Stebbins. I copied pasted the entire article. I removed their names, and then I threw it into the LLM, and I asked it to give me their demographic variables, who these people potentially could be, what this text medium is, what this text even is, who these people are, their income, their gender, race, etc. And it only took first it output sort of it predicted this is a dialogue between 2 journalists who know a lot of things, and it might be either it might either come from the Atlantic or from the New York Times. And I was like, okay, you're getting pretty close. And it was well, it might be these 2 people, or this other person is oh, well, you have the names. And it did correctly guess their political ideology. I think Gail Collins is conservative and Stebbins is a liberal. Geography, it said these people are most likely in an urban place in a coastal state, and their education. They weren't at all correct on their age. Chat said that they're a lot younger than they actually are. I think Gail Collins is 80, and guessed that she was probably between 30 and 50. They also, and that one also couldn't really guess gender very well either. Another test I did was bot detection. This wasn't really something we tested too much in this study, but one technique I did was I asked ChatGPT to generate 10 comments, and then 5 of them were short comments, 5 of them are much longer comments, and then I asked them to generate these comments, which you would find on a subreddit, which would talk about politics. And then I copy paste these comments. I made another thread, and I asked it to forget everything it already knows about me, and what I asked it in previous how do you say, the threads that you asked ChatGPT in. So it was basically going in this as a new account in a way. I put in, and then I pasted in these comments, and then it said 80% of them were humans, even though they're all artificially generated by itself. So and then I did another test where I took some actual real comments, and I made 5 of them real human generated comments. Well, I'm assuming they're real human generated. and then like 5 fake comments, which it generated itself. And then it gave it was like 60% correct, like determining who was a bot, who was a human. And that's how I just averaged the two. So more important for our study is precision. Since we can't really, we'll talk about accuracy later. But precision we can sort of determine by multiple extractions from the API. And so we did 2 extractions because using the API is expensive. But there was a sort of like a meshing together of the 2 extractions, and there was overall like an 84% convergence, or like 84% of the output was like the same, and like less than 16% was different. So there's some percentage of like replicatability or repeatability, if we want to talk about like robustness of our study. I'm gonna talk a little bit about like my own takes of chat stylography. So this is actually an interesting debate like we were having as a group, what word do we put here, like what are we trying to who are we? We came to the consensus that question is about since there is no true positive, since there's no accuracy that we can really say, ultimately, the best way we can describe what we're trying to figure out is harmony. Is there harmony between us as humans being amateur stylographers versus the LLM's stylography assessment? I think for the most part, it was pretty accurate. There were some issues which it was kind of, there was some context that it didn't have or was less accurate about. One thing I noticed was that this is one anecdote I have. So there's this user who was active on r/InfoWarriorRides. This was a subreddit which had to do with vans with crazy bumper stickers, right-wing bumper stickers. They would look like they would watch InfoWars at Alex Jones fate. However, Chat4O and OpenAI thought that people who participated in the subreddit were far-right people, when actually these are normal, maybe you could say they're left-wing people making fun of these far-right people, right? So it's it doesn't have there were a couple of instances where it didn't have the context for that, or it saw someone participating in the subreddit where it perceived them to be this way, when if it actually took more weight to its comments, then it would understand that it's not someone who's affiliated with the far right. What else? Chat was generally bad at regions. There was some instance where someone said they were from Maryland and then it grouped them in the Northeast. Even though Maryland's in the South.
Yeah, no, Maryland was recorded to be in the South because the one from Pennsylvania up.
Yeah.
For the Northeast.
Winston, that's in Houston.
Yeah. I just got kind of close. And
Maybe the culture.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe that guy culture, based off what he says on Reddit and based off how OpenAI, how the API interprets that. It was also, I also just generally noticed it scored Harris, these 3 variables that we're looking about vis-a-vis Harris, much lower than I think it should have. It generally, I don't think really gave scores above 0.7, and it was very rare to see a score above 0.5. And I think that might have had to do with the fact that its corpus is only updated up to October 2023. And when I asked it, I noticed something was kind of interesting, because when I put in this is an article where the 2 are talking about Kamala Harris's chances of winning. This is published in October 2024, and ChatGPT was this is a fictional account or a fictional dialogue between 2 smart people talking about a hypothetical situation where Kamala Harris is running for president against Donald Trump, which it's real, but it doesn't know it's real yet. So I thought that, maybe they can make things more up to date. I don't know if you guys have like anecdotes as well.
Yeah, there was one where it said that somebody was a boomer because they were posting and boomers suck. You know, like there was weird stuff that was happening.
And sometimes with the prompts too, you have to get a little,
Yeah.
say, like passive aggressive with the with like how you were prompting them. So like had to be more direct and be like shorter, smaller, more direct, like, and then they would just kind of follow your lead without actually taking direction of its own. And so you kind of had to get creative with the wording in a sense of just like what exactly can we say this is an accurate estimate of, which can also be seen as like a little bit of confirmation bias, a little bit of cherry picking.
Authority matters.
But yeah, and also the fact that we got heated in the business library over harmony. It was a testament in itself of just like the state of a lot of inconclusive determinations that we have with how we saw this as a reliable source to give accurate statement.
Well, accurate.
Accurate.
It's an indicator what you didn't hear there.
Yeah.
In the thousand.
Validity, yeah.
Also, Cliff Young, everyone.
You're right.
You got a shout out earlier, Vince.
I'm sorry.
So we wanted to kind of go over some use cases or ways that this could be used, you know, if people wanted to continue doing this in previous elections. One of the ones that we thought was kind of a mock focus group or a replacement for focus group. We were able to pull some really interesting verbatims from these comments. And we were, you know, if you believe the assigning of demographic variables, you know, we could kind of make a statement about who was saying what. So for instance, Democrats lost ground with Black women about 4 points for 2020. And if you want to know about why, you can look at some of the things that they're saying directly. So they had a 35% likelihood of feeling positively about Harris's electability. And what I've noticed is they don't necessarily not support Harris. In fact, they do, but they're worried. They make comments about the greater world, or, you know, is the world ready for a mixed woman of color? Or they also made comments. She made about her mixed identity and being Black or mixed and how those two are incorporate into each other. And then I also think it's interesting, too, to point out that when you're looking at sentiment around her economy, economic policies, most Black women were referring to things that worried them about Trump and not necessarily positives that they saw in Harris's plan. Another group of interest is men. So according to a 60 Minutes broadcast, Harris alienated men in the quest for the female vote. And so we can look at these verbatims and see if we find that to be true. These Reddit comments indicated dislike for her economic plan, a lack of policy or vague policy, and mentions of being worse off today than they were when Trump was in office. It was also interesting to note that there was no mention of women's rights or abortion among this group, and that is maybe potentially speaks to their level of involvement or direct relation to the issue.
Back to like ratings and rankings, the military attribute model, and what type of demographics ranked issues higher than the others.
Yeah, do you want to like read out some quotes perhaps that we thought were like very interesting?
Yeah, we kind of highlighted some things that we thought, you know, were interesting. I liked this one where it was talking about how she's energizing young voters, but again, it's not necessarily because of anything she's doing. It's just because people didn't like Biden, and so they really enjoyed this change. A lot of people mentioning sparse economic policies, her avoiding talking about her policy in general, and I think that really, the unknown of it all really bothered people.
I really like this one. The average voter doesn't care about politics, all vibes. Kamala's vibes are better than Trump's and Biden's. That's it. That's the only reason.
Yeah, kind of indicating there's nothing else that her campaign provides other than an alternative or to Trump, which maybe wasn't enough.
And then just going in real quick, this may be a little familiar because less than an hour ago we were talking about sentiment analysis in Mari's class. Uh, and so we were doing a sentiment analysis and going off of Jordan's point, as you can see right here, this is divided up into positive and negative sentiment where we scored the wording. So we tokenized it, we filtered it, et cetera, and then we used the Lawford McDonald dictionary in RStudio to score the wording. So that way we had this lovely output, and as you can see, there's a lot more negative sentiment, and it goes off of Jordan's point that may not necessarily be that they're talking negatively about Kamala Harris herself, but more so a lot of the wording surrounding mentions of her are negative because of either worry or kind of just even general fear of what Trump's policies entail. So that is one thing to look at, and then we also looked at all of the threads that we looked at and had a word frequency bar chart. And as you can see at the top, Trump is most mentioned. This was essentially the question, potentially of can Kamala Harris be Donald Trump? That was the big question of this election. And, you also see people like this really is about the decision of the voters, but the American people in this aspect of the election where it is the question of what direction do we want to go in between these two candidates. And it also mentions the Biden kind of given since she is a VP of his administration. And, just going down the list, you see a lot of mentions, even economic policies, women, work, woman, and also just thinking about electability, economy, and these different issues that came up during the election. And going into the next slide, this is a GIF. Yes, it's a GIF. And, it's a continuation of the top 40 words, but week by week. And Sinan, if you want to point out some wordings.
Yeah, so I don't know. You don't really see tariffs come up. That was something I was found interesting. But I don't know. Of course, like each of our threads kind of like are picked out in between when Kamala started running and the election day. So I don't know. Like at least in the thread that we picked out on October 6th, like we really cared about people and not so much Trump. I don't know.
Also, the state of Georgia was brought up. So, the question of can Kamala Harris win Georgia? The question of which states can she actually win, because so much was up in the air in the polling and also on, read or subreddits that what could she win Georgia? And so that was a big question. And you saw that with the overrepresentation of the South regionally too. So potentially, a lot of voters were based in Georgia specifically, and so there's great interest on what politics look like for the state in the 2024 elections.
It's interesting that the word black is almost always at the top.
Yeah, this
actually a few weeks ago, back.
Yeah.
Was number one.
Oh yeah, it just keeps.
Yeah, October 6th.
Well, yep, he keeps recycling. Hopefully soon. Okay.
Actually, yeah, listen, no, recycling. Maybe you can like go back and reload it.
Oh no, we have to reload it.
Well, imagine the GIF recycle.
Yes, and then real quick, so now I mentioned tariffs, which does show up in this workshop that I constructed.
Very faint.
Very faint. I did find it a little bit humorous that was brought up a little bit. But, I am going to ask, like, what are some big words that y'all see here?
Trump.
Trump.
too. No Donald, just Trump.
Just Trump. Yeah. And we also made sure to remove the stop words, too, so that way we can actually have and ensure that these were unique words that came up frequently. But yeah, this really was a case of electability against Trump. And it is not even necessarily, you have one facet talking about her capability of beating Trump, but also potentially her ability to represent the people. And so there's a lot of different conclusions that could be made with the words present on the word cloud. which is the primary limitation. Directly, it's kind of hard to make the definitive conclusive statement here, but with the wording, it kind of gives you an idea of what is going on here. And also, you're thinking about what exactly is going on in public discourse, and also how can campaigns or campaign strategists utilize this information for communication strategies, for topic identification, comparative analysis to other candidates. So these are like different use cases, or I'm sorry, not use cases, but like different applications of how these types of visualizations can be utilized.
Okay, let's tie this all together, hopefully. So we've listed some benefits, what this is good for, what it might not be good for. I think one of the more compelling, my personal opinion, one of the more compelling aspects is that it allows us to collect verbatims regarding specific topics of interest that, in my opinion, are on par with some of the open-end responses that you would get in surveys, and have the potential to rival insights from focus groups at a lower cost and without the time and scheduling constraints. In my internship over the summer, I received a lot of emails about how much rescheduling focus groups would cost, and how much it would cost to add on oversamples, and that's not something that you would have to worry about here. Or there would be times where we were ready to go forward with the focus group and the campaign would tell us to stop because they wanted to reevaluate what they were doing. Another thing that's interesting is that it allows you to track Redditors, or the same Redditors, over time, so you can see how opinions are shifting and changing as it gets closer to the election, as events, policies, or debates happen. And public opinion is very dynamic, and when you're doing surveys, you're really looking at public opinion at that specific moment in time, and having something like this, or incorporating something like this into your polling insights, allows you to kind of bring that dynamic nature of public opinion into it, that it is constantly shifting and changing, which I would say is very beneficial. And then the Redditors are posting like real opinions of their own volition. So sometimes you see response biases. We saw that in some of the polls here, where people were hesitant to acknowledge that they were voting for Trump, or maybe they would say that they were voting third party to feel better about things, and then when it actually came to the election, that's not necessarily what they were doing. That pressure is kind of taken off when you're looking at what people are choosing to post. They don't feel necessarily judged by researchers that are really looking at analyzing their opinions. And then using OpenAI really helped expedite the actual coding of the open ends, and made achieving insights a lot faster, so that we could keep up with changing opinion. Whereas if you're doing an open end on a survey, you have to have somebody, some firms have somebody read through all of the open ends and code them by hand, or maybe they do heavily assistive, coding or supervised coding of these open ends, and in the future, I can see AI being really useful in expediting that process.
Yeah, so I can talk about some drawbacks. So one, actually these 2 points go together, but you can't really determine the exact demographics of your commenters. At the end, you're just trusting what you're getting. You can't even determine if they're registered voters. That would be very difficult to determine. I think you could definitely determine whether or not they live in the country, or if maybe if they're a citizen. But also, your commenters, you're always going to have a sample bias. It's up to you to determine what kind of sample bias you want. So you kind of have to play into it. You might want to create as representative of a sample as you want, or you might want to really harvest a focus group. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to deal with determining whether or not a sentiment, you will pick up a sentiment, but you have to determine whether that sentiment is a minority sentiment, or if it's how, to what extent it's widespread. Are you encountering a loud minority? Paradoxically, yeah, like the API is like cheaper than a focus group, but for students it's costly. So we're kind of like in the weird middle area. So that's at least for us. Well, I mean, it's cheap. It would be cheap for a campaign. Columbia was very generous for us, so shout out for like compensating. But
Yes.
Then support and
Shout out to us.
at least we're getting something back, Shade. But yeah, so being unable to determine accuracy of like stylographic analysis is like interesting, and I would say that there is indeed issues of harmony between our analysis and 4O's conclusions. And I would say that we were determining like to what extent is like a person, like could this automate like a person who's just like always encoding, who's like encoding focus groups, right? To some extent, the person is of more as a human, I would trust the person's like conclusions more than ChatGPT's conclusions. I have less harmony with GPTO's conclusions, and I have more harmony with and more trust with the person. So,
But as things progress, things might change in the future.
they just gotta. I think there's more. I think there's more development that should go into stylometry before we can like really kind of use it reliably.
And
The cost of the model that you use, the pre-trained model, the cost to train it was $850 million.
What's another 150 more?
I agree.
He's right for peanuts.
okay. We just have fun.
Hey, before you go to Q&A, just I want to prompt.
They have something still.
Who did you determine in our scenario construction exercise? Who did you all pick as the winner?
We before weeks before the election took place, we all knew that Trump was going to win.
And what were the probabilities? You remember them?
Yes.
We did three scenarios. We did an accurate scenario. We did kind of overestimating in Kamala Harris's favor, and then
You're looking at signals now.
yes, signals, yes. And then we did a third one.
That all of them ranked Harris below the 50%.
Yeah.
Well, it's based off historical data.
Yeah, even when we tried to skew the data in her favor, it was still under 50%.
And the sample of the skewing was, back to the incumbency point, like assuming that Harris was the incumbent in the scenario rather than the successor to Biden, because statistically speaking, successors actually only have a 6% likelihood of winning their election. And this was true for Hillary Clinton since she was the successor to Barack Obama. So that was kind of like one of the numbers that we skewed because, it was up in the air on how you perceived incumbency in this election. And across the board still, Harris was underperforming. But yeah, and then she had, yes.
We have a fun little palette cleanser.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do we have audio?
We did.
Oh,
Just, you've seen.
Can we get a caption?
Here, wait, I got it.
wait, go back. You started with that.
That which
That is not up to date. Red Murray, so you could say it.
we don't no. I identify myself as a but people can't know it. Men hate that. And women hate that, which I believe so. So that's the word. Yes, and recently I met say that DC.
Which is
The clip was the clip was very relevant because of the question of leaning into gender and leaning into identity of a candidate, because the big question was, should Harris have talked about her identity as a woman of color much more, or was she seen talking too much about her identity as a woman of color? It was a little bit interesting because, back to the point of pragmatic bias, with the sample size alternatively with Hillary Clinton, it is arguable that pragmatic bias wasn't present for Clinton because it was that It wasn't because she was a woman, it was because she was a Clinton that she lost the election. So a lot of stuff is up in the air on that point when it came to the electability of women, and also being seen as a electable candidate that is also a woman and proclaims that they are a woman. So yeah, and I think with that, we can end off our presentation now and give it to Q&A.
Tim Cameron is just under 60 minutes.
That's a record.
I just have one. First of all, this I think is a really creative approach to doing this kind of analysis. What are your thoughts on, like, I'm not sure your research question was about having some sort of a parity polling to figure out, can this be a backstop to polling? Can this help support polling? Now, I'm assuming you're saying it can't, right? Because you don't really have, but you do kind of indicate that you can see that it's under, right? Or you could probably, in the first case, you could see that it's over if you were getting some signal that's showing she was like outperforming the polls. Would you use that? Would you say, do this, if she's way under according to this, then people should be looking at their numbers, they think she's going to win?
Yeah, so I definitely don't think this method is going to replace polling anytime soon. But I do think that it can definitely provide more insights. If you're doing both of these, polling and this type of data collection at the same time, and you see, like you saw with voters under 30, we expect this huge margin, 14-point advantage for Harris. But why are we getting sentiment that's so negative among this group? Maybe we should investigate this a little bit more. It did end up coming in at 6 points, so polling was overestimating a little bit. So not a replacement, but more of a way to fine tune or see potential areas of interest.
So essentially an enhancement of the non-survey data inputs that we had.
The key point, just to finish that, was like this method can add context to quantitative data, and you can see that we extracted both quantitative and qualitative context to quantitative data that is reported in polls. So
Yes.
Do you have any context as to how representative Reddit users are the wider United States population?
Yeah. Yes. Not very. It's Saxon can speak more to this, but it's predominantly white.
This is predominantly millennial, white, and Asian men that utilize Reddit. There is a Pew Research survey called On Social Media News came out this year. And so that's why I said, this isn't representative of our of the Gen Pop. This is more representative in terms of informing us the type of voter strategy that can be utilized. Because you saw with Harris struggling to win back Biden's coalition, who exactly in the coalition was she struggling with? And so in this aspect, it was kind of the convenience that we chose a platform that had a dominant user base that Harris needed to win for a coalition. Yeah.
Kind of like, I guess, adding more to that, especially with the context of Harris being the first black woman to get this level of campaigning, and then looking at the patterns with President Obama. Was there any information on further analysis on the opinions of black men? Especially with the invaders, she kind of, I guess, changed her strategy to include black men a little bit more. So, if not, with their project and the results of the election, do you think that their fans will reflect more of those who identify as black women or black men? Or in fact, that's question from y'all.
Yeah,
Compare the two responses.
Yeah.
Did with the data point.
So, just, to preface, this is very specific, the types of people posting on Reddit. So I don't know if it's, at this moment, appropriate to generalize, but going through the verbatim, something that I did see that I thought was interesting in regards to black men was a lot of them were talking about, in an interview, Harris was asked if she would do anything specifically for black people, and her response was about the lines of, I'm not going to do anything specifically for Black people. I'm going to do what's best for everyone. And that was a very alienating statement coming from her. And the sentiment generally seemed to be, you have all of these other politicians who do stuff for their own and their constituents and make sure that they like uplift their communities, and why can't we have one politician who is willing to look out for us? The black vote, like I said, a lot of it was, or 9 points were lost from 2020 to 2024, which, you know, at face value, you wouldn't necessarily think to see happen. And I think it did because there were some potentially alienating comments, and there were times when she really wanted to identify with her Black identity, and times when it was better to identify as a mixed person, or times when it was better to avoid that identity at all. And I think Black people really wanted her to step into who she is.
Also, touching on social desirability bias, who's like familiar with the Bradley effect or the Wallner effect here? Okay, so the Bradley effect was coined after LA Mayor Tom Bradley back, I believe, in the 80s. He ran for Attorney General of California, and the polling showed that he was pulling ahead of his opponent, but he lost his election significantly. And so that was a big question of like, what is going on here? And so social desirability bias tends to showcase where voters will say the socially acceptable response that signifies progression, but then it becomes a different story in the voting booth. So it is a question of what were the folks saying on Reddit verbally? Did they perceive Reddit as a platform where it would be socially acceptable to vote for a woman of color to be president, and turn around and vote the opposite way in the voting booth? But, you know, this happened for nearly all demographics in this election, where there was a swing to Trump. And you saw it in also based safe Democratic states. California and New York, they had their numbers sludged quite a bit in this election. And so, you know, it's kind of ironic because Nancy Pelosi said this isn't something to worry about. It is definitely something to worry about, because what is tip messaging that you're showing to these voters that not only should they vote for you because of the sign of progress, but it's because this includes them in progress as well. So that was the type of messaging strategy that was kind of not effectively communicated enough, especially for demographic groups like Black men this election, because of the alienation of certain statements, as Jordan mentioned.
Hey, howdy.
Long time no speak.
I had a question about this great thing you were doing as first Tom Barron, very interested in like so people listening and media and stuff. But it feels like the appeal in it is that you have, you know, hundreds of thousands of threads that are happening across like the platform every single bit. And I've never used the this great package and I'm curious what the inputs were. I was just like, oh, think do a specific, but any what the outputs look like. They it seemed like because you only get 7 and so that was like the limitation was the content blank bottle. Yes. On the screen result. I'm just curious if you feel like you could have easily, used that scraper specifically to come through, instead of like 7 threads, like 7 different pages, Reddit. Well, I don't know what they call them, Reddit pages.
Like that stuff, Reddit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then on every single one, was, year or something, so you have instead of 7 threads, 7,000 in the threads. I wish, yeah.
So the package we used was Reddit Extractor R, so it was specifically for Reddit, and it was very, very straightforward and easy to use. But it would scrape, so you could scrape one subreddit or one thread at a time, and then from there you could scrape comments. So what we ended up doing was creating a for loop to go through it. So actually scraping the comments surprisingly took a very long time. Well, I guess not a very long, maybe it took like a day to scrape like 535 users, and it was just running in the background.
Because
But very easy to use package registry.
it just saved back like the comment and the name of the.
I'll put a CSV file. If you, here, let me, I'm pulling
So like what we did was like, it was beyond just like extracting like 7 threads, but it was extracting all of the data of every user which commented on these 7 threads. So exponentially it gets like pretty big, because like one comment can be potentially 20 pages worth of a user's profile's comments. Like if they've been using Reddit for like, 8 or 10 years or something, that could be a lot of data.
Oh, it's all of the.
It's all
Yes.
of their
Yes, because
users.
when it comes to, so that's what we're feeding into when it comes to like the stylometry. Like that's like we're inputting an entire CSV of an entire like user to like analyze all of that data to come to the conclusion. It's not just one comment.
That's how you get the user. That's how you get the person's identity.
Yeah, like everything they said on Reddit.
That's
Because they inject to be out.
This is one user CSV file.
Not to expose it.
This is what it outputted. Like some of them have issues. We have to do this one a few times, so this isn't like.
But that's their comment, and this is how we encoded them.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
so
no, that's not
these are where we were getting. Well, this isn't where we were getting the verbatims from. This is where we were doing how we were doing stylometric analysis. The verbatims that we pulled were coming from the specific threads that we looked at.
That would have been really good to put in your presentation.
Yeah.
It's right here. Because this is, I had no idea you were actually getting I thought you were getting the person's identity from their posts within these threads. This is I think this is much better way to figure out who this person is. So you ever think they're holding up?
But my suggestion to you guys is just in general is R is not really made for web scraping.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the comments that I make is you really need to use Python for that kind of stuff. There's a much more robust Python code that can basically get to a million comments.
And it's faster.
Much better.
This is this is how simple it is. You just put in the URL of it, like it's so. And then this is our for loop. Yeah, very, very straightforward. This package I think was really helpful.
Well, I don't think it was really that fun. No.
So you were looking at you had their comments across all their threads, but then you were focusing on some specific threads with politics or broad.
Yeah. Felt for demographic analysis, it was better to have as much data as possible.
But did you estimate the demographics from all of the thread, or just the 7 thread?
Well, we had 7 threads. We got each of the users that commented on those threads, and then we scraped those. And then we used the API to make another for loop that took each of the user CSV files and ran it through the prompt.
Combines together.
So they're
Can I show that methodology?
estimating using them full their whole performance.
Yes.
That's because I was thinking it's just those threads. My concern is actually mostly about estimating demographics. That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, and so to me, it seems like it's very useful for estimating sentiment. It seems like using it for demographics, we're quite.
Yes.
It's a little more difficult, but a corpus was used.
It was mostly accurate. It was just really inaccurate when it came to region. I like predicting region.
We don't know.
And
We don't know.
There's
That's my opinion. My opinion was that it was inaccurate.
because certainly some of the sentiment is off because you have
Yes.
sort of black and white sentiment or the same, or some of the orderings are
Yeah.
right.
But the maps are based upon each individual's score, right?
Yes.
So it's doing a pretty good job because of reasonably sense. They
Yeah.
were ordered like they should be ordered. Against maybe from a precision standpoint, there might be an issue, but from the workload standpoint, you're probably doing a pretty good job of reaching.
And one thing.
One was up,
Yeah.
that's just it.
And one thing that I would do if I was to do this again, one thing I definitely would do is a baseline survey, or maybe incorporate it into a regular survey that you're already running. Just have an optional question at the end where it's like if you're willing to. Yes, give us your Reddit handle, and then you can connect it to the voter file, and then you have more accurate information. So that's what I would recommend.
And like I saw commands here and then dynamic. What?
No, I was just wondering what criteria did you use to choose the set of threads?
Lots of confirmations.
Yeah, sample bias.
We also looked, like, we knew the main problem in the selection was going to be the economy. So we were looking at threads that were specifically asking questions about why people liked Harris's economy, or some threads referenced polls that were specifically related to economy. And so we did have some, we were going in, we had specific interests that we wanted to look at, and we were finding threads that fit those interests.
And also, we were having concerns with the abortion stance as well. We were looking at Reddits concerning, or subreddits concerning women, and looking at a specific thread, as I mentioned, of abortion policy in the election. I was saw Trump making a stand of saying like, oh, we're leaving into the states, or Harris saying like, we're going to reenact Roe v. Wade. And so those are the type of threads that we were like trying to look for in order to actually gather a good estimation for the three key aspects of this project that we were trying to look at. And then with concerns to like Kamala Harris's electability, the one thread at the beginning, Kamala Harris is the face of the mixed race, that pertains to her electability as a mixed woman of color. And so it was these specific Reddits, yes, they were cherry-picked, but there was a specific focus of like what we were looking for in order to analyze the users in each of the subreddits. And then Benny.
Oh, that's my question.
I look at Gandios.
So, just so you should not understand the process, right? You like a 7 threads that were like pretty base. Within the 7 threads, that the 535 users that were within the thread. Then you took the users and granted, and based on what the user said. So from another thread that's not connected to the book thread, you'd be like, well, as a Michigan person, I love eating burgers.
Yep.
Yes.
So that you use that to, I guess, some things
We're a Republican.
to figure out, okay, this person is pro-abortion.
Yeah.
They're from Michigan. So we use those analysis, put them into that.
Yeah, well, we didn't do that. The AI did that.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would take those results that basically pretty looking at puts that.
It was also difficult with the political threads too, because one of the things that we had was the political interest variable. If you're in a political thread, the AI is going to assume that this is a very politically interested person. So you wanted to ensure that when you're looking at all these comments, that they were actually having a diversified profile of the user that was put in the output.
I would to go over the how are you prompting the just like this was like film photography.
Yeah.
What were the prompts?
Now we're getting like the entire user see all the comments and being saying summarize this into these categories.
Yeah, basically.
So this is what we were doing. These
Scroll.
these are the specific prompts. But basically, it would look at this target column, which was the comments that they were making. It would clean that, and then it would assign. I don't think this is like fully updated from what it is. My bad.
It's actually
But this is like the prompt that we would have used. There's some slight changes that have been made.
You may want to read this out because I don't think they
Can you show the appendix real quick with the code book?
Yes.
But yeah, we'll give like a more descriptive example of it.
Is your Git public? Can we get to it?
It's not public yet. I thought about making it public, but I don't.
Scrub the data. Or like,
Yeah,
It's all through apology.
I want to remove the usernames. I mean, it's all publicly available information, but
Yeah, scrape the PII and make it public. I'd love to see that.
So going real quick to the code book extras. So like this is updated, but this is how we kind of coded all of the values in the prompts themselves. So that way we're able to code things easier and estimate.
It's CBS. Are they simply like what's the file?
Oh no, this is just a regular code book. Like you know how like the American National Election Survey, they have an accompanying code book that comes with it. And so, but Jordan made up the prompts. I put the code book there for just like a style reference. So that way it just exists, but it is a helpful tool to kind of know like what type of scale are you looking for, and also what type of visualizations you want to make with these specific variables.
We made sure to make these questions as concise, have as few choices as possible, to really force it to make a choice and not be uncertain.
Yeah, and it's also not the exact question that we put in the prompt, by the way. This was just a descriptor that we put in for the codebook.
On this, stop. Do what I think. So I'm trying to open the actual output that chat gave us. Okay. Yeah, we have the actual output that chat gave us too.
Please do make them replicated. That's cool.
This is, well, I guess this is fine, but this is like the output that ignore the usernames, the output that was given. And actually, because some of these CSVs were really, really long when we were putting it through the prompt, we split it up, and so some users had like 10 different rows. And what we did was for the demographic variables, we determined that it would be best to use mode, just how often chat picks this one variable. But then for our outcome variables of interest, we did the average there.
And you can see how low, I mean, these top 10 users are like some, I looked at them and there's no way that some of these people really have no support towards Harris's economic plan and Harris's abortion plan. It's really low. If OpenAI is able to like kind of fix their methodology, like in the backends, like, I don't know, I think this could be a much better analysis.
But I'd be very careful reading levels with that kind of.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end that they're
fuzzy measurement goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're reporting
Vibes.
chat's vibe. What chat thinks is the vibe, which I think is not the vibe. Sometimes.
So, case in point, kids, don't take ChatGPT and AI as face value. You have to investigate a little bit further.
Do you agree that some people had once more pros that it was relatively split?
There were definitely some extreme differences. Sometimes somebody would have five conservative choices and then a random liberal in there. So that's kind of why we did mode, but there definitely was more of one category being selected and like a human mix.
And also that's why we, back to like getting passive aggressive with prompts and everything, like, you see the wild variety in the results and you're like, what the hell? Okay, gotta rerun it now and get a little bit more, concrete and kind of mean with what's the mind. So yes.
Can you give you an estimate of how much it costs to get comparable data, whether it's on terms of like number of users, the amount of posts? Because I know it's all works, but it needs to be free, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can give you that answer because we spread Twitter.
Or truth.
Yeah.
It could be significantly high because Twitter actually has commercial API rates. Reddit, Reddit is probably 7 or 8 times cheaper.
Does Columbia
Up to Twitter.
an agreement? Because you track what till polls, right?
I don't know the Columbia app, so there used to be the API. We can't do this free training. So I'm just curious now because
They used to have like a dynamic API until the new owner.
yeah.
After he came in, that was all.
Yeah, I know that's background, but I'm just curious. Like, I haven't done the math myself. Like, how much more expensive it would be because I have a ton of Twitter data. In an archive, and it includes politicians' data. So the thing is, like, you could do like maybe it could improve the identification of users in terms of region, gender, race, because we have because the politicians does like you know exactly what the demographic is.
It also fills up ideological holes that this did that, right?
Yeah.
And I would also argue maybe if you're paying more for the Twitter X API, because the Reddit API is token-based and tweets are still limited to 180 tokens. Is that true?
240.
240. some of these prompts or comments people were leaving were really long.
Like
And
what?
so
Yeah.
putting that CSV through would cost more than putting a few 260 token tweets in. So you might save money on the
Also,
chat, the OpenAI.
also a lot more variety to when it came to sentiment analysis and like the actual robustness of the amount of words that we found because, you know, with tweeting limited in its characterization, it may be more probable to see recurring words that do not, what the word count not even meaning like what we inputted in are in the first place. So we kind of were fortunate enough to have a lot more word variety for users to describe like, their thoughts when mentioning errors in this context.
Yeah, Reddit is very. I think I really like the data that we got from Reddit a lot more than what we could have done with Twitter, because the writing, you're able to express yourself in a more thought out way. You're doing so in going back to Reddit, and you're doing so in a space which is where it's appropriate to do so. It's not like Twitter where it's like a free for all like Thunderbird. There's like you're doing it in a correct time, in a correct space, with presumably a level head, and it's you get like reasonably cohesive, coherent like takes and written by like normal people. So
Yeah, I mean, just quickly. So I'm obviously one of the instructors, but I'm also a professional pollster, run polling business. And what I would say is, wow, by the way, this is a great presentation. You know, I know we work a lot with you on it, but what you guys came up with, great final, was great. Listen, I think you should be a little bit less humble and a little bit more forceful about how impressive this is. Because I'm looking at it from a business rate. So polling is not going to, this what we're doing here right now is not going to replace quantitative polling. Maybe someday, but not today, right? What it can replace, is the point you made, Jordan, is qualitative, or at least it can help us get really far. And so you showed a way that's faster, cheaper, and I believe, at least with this replication, the first one, it's reasonably robust. And really, if you go through it, I know that we weren't looking at it like that, but all those regions made sense. We don't know what the levels we need. That's okay. Organically speaking, it made sense. That table that you showed, Jordan, with all the demographics, the three attributes, really, that's pretty impressive. Because if you look at the deltas, they're all directionally the same. And so Reddit and the Evocast, which is truth, that is truth. That is the benchmark. For the most part, not it completely, but for the most part, it trends in the same direction. That's pretty valid. And then when you talk about reliability, man, I'll take 84% overlap to Vegas any day. I'll do that. And so the point is, obviously this has to be replicated. That's the sample's bias, so I can only do focus groups or focus group like approximates with liberal people. We know that now. But you can get on like Truth and snag some people there, or get on Twitter and snag some people there, or like we can find other ways to get on WhatsApp. But different ways to do it and complement that. But I just think in those two those two slides, relying on main validity, you show that directionally speaking, I think there's something there. And then when you show the qualitative, that's the thing I was most impressed by. It's really, really rich. It looks like focus group quotes, right? Obviously, again, need to be replicated. The sample needs to be kind of built out so you don't have biases in it. But, for me as a practitioner, this is interesting.
That's funny.
I definitely agree with those points, but I think most to me, it is the I keep forgetting the worst things, but like the ability of generative AI to
Stylometry?
what's it?
Stylography?
Yeah, it's not like pizza. Yeah.
Stylometry is that stylometry?
Because I've never heard of it. Is that something does it have any research?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
Yeah.
Like how accurately it would pass on somebody to different subgroups using social media profiling. Because if that's like reliable to some degree, you have no shortage of things that people are saying. I tell you, I think that is one of the major barriers to like some let's say you don't understand what. And I feel like that would be very significant. So I'm just here to came across me like two different creators anyway. Oh, you did pretty accurately.
I was doing the literature review for this project, and it was yes, actually there was Feng et al. 2023 was talking about forecasting presidential elections using machine learning, but it didn't go specifically into stylographic methods, but it is kind of getting creative with the type of methodologies that we're using in the same vein, but this is kind of relatively new. And also I think that's kind of why we're not boasting about this too much, because we know that this is a frontier without actually being excited that this is a new frontier, because we don't know like what this actually holds for the future for Castro elections.
I think we can be proud that we're being pretty innovative here.
Well, so there is actually something called NIST, National Institute of Statistics, where NIST has annual competitions that take different NLP and NLU approaches and for raters, right? Usually there's about 60 or 70 participants that go to that, and they do sentiment analysis. Then you have at one measure you have like a full sector that are very carefully estimated, right? Now, having said all of this, the GASCO does not like to participate in this type of competitions. It is OpenAI and also Anthropic, because they don't want to expose, for example, how well they do versus some of the lower groups in competition. In fact, the largest number of participants in this type of competitions they usually come from China, because they're trying to make a name for themselves by showing that their sentiment analysis works quite well. But in general, when it comes to things such as gender, age, and geography, the typical estimate of typical Socrates is around 72 or 73%. Okay. That is the estimate, right? Now, having said that, that depends on how big your data corpus is, right? So one accurate approach that was done here was scraping all the comments of the users, not just the comments that related to a particular political subreddit, to kind of get a better sense of who these people are. Maybe they belong to a particular local club. Maybe they root for a particular local team. There's a whole bunch of indicators that give you a sense of the geoaccuracy and also local slang that these people use to understand who they are. And that's what the algorithm uses a lot of times.
You guys need to start at Steinhardt if you start.
Yes. Go for it.
And as much as we would like to know, this was
I think it would be interesting to look at Anthropic's API. I think the purpose of our study, I think it actually could have done even better job at OpenAI. But I said I go to Reacher.
Does Columbia pay for Anthropic?
Good question.
any more questions?
I mean, I would second Cliff. I mean, the fact that you guys did it really, really fast to create kind of like a functional prototype was pretty cool.
No.
If you want to keep working on it, I'm available.
Or, so a lovely new cohort of talent to expand on this next year, potentially.
Real.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.